this is an AMA, so they can just come in at any time. There's not any like particularly set content here. It's really just to answer questions for people who have, questions about building in mobile, like it's particularly, I focus more on the scripting and game mechanics side of things. So if you have questions on how to make your mobile submission work better for mobile players in terms of like integrating with like the camera controls or the local controls or any of the other sort of mobile centric things like overlays and things like that, then I'm here to answer questions for you. So anyway, just reminding everybody there's the skills matrix. And so we're going to be focusing on, some of the programming and systems, as well as some mechanics. And yeah, probably that's the main things we're going to be working on with the skills matrix here. And just a reminder for the office hours info, like this is recorded. You mute yourself unless you have a question, raise your hand if you want to ask questions or mention it in the chat, and I'll try to make sure I monitor the chat to make sure to look there. Keep your questions concise so that everybody gets a chance. And I guess if you have particular context, try to spell that out in the channel first, in the chat group first, so that it's a little bit more context before we jump into it. Be active in the chat. And then there's a survey at the end if people could fill out, and that would be great. And then, of course, I'm in the forums and other channels. So if you want to tag me later, that would be great. And I think that's, so that's just the end of that. So anyway, it's an AMA. So we can go over whatever you guys want to work on or look at, or just need to here to answer questions for you, and we can like pull up and do any sort of examples of any parts of the Horizon system you want to dive into. So as I said, this is an AMA, and that means you guys are in charge. So questions. So Natasha has a question about simple demo of first-person camera view and focus interaction. Sure, we can take a quick look at that. Does anybody else have any other questions about other things that they wanted to take a look at?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
I use a Samsung Galaxy Tab A7, and I'm having an issue with the button overlays, and as far as scaling proportions and all of that. I really don't know much about it. I just know that it's happening with me, and I'd like to bring that up possibly.
So you're saying like you're trying to do a mobile development on the Galaxy Tab, and the scaling of what is problematic? Like this, what is the aspect ratio on the tablet screen is not meshing very well with the aspect ratio of Horizon Worlds?
Yeah, let me try to rephrase here. On the mobile phone, the button overlay matches with the screen presses, and when I open up Horizon Worlds on my tablet, the actual press locations are almost off the visible screen actual area, and I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, that is a strange bug. I don't think I have seen that problem. Like I've used so one of the issues is that I think you may have noticed is that the sort of default aspect ratio of the mobile screen is 19:9. So that works out to like a 2.11:1 aspect ratio, because that's the aspect ratios of like most iPhones and Samsung phones and stuff like that. They're kind of 19:9. However, most tablets are more 4:3. And so I haven't noticed a problem with running on the iPad. It seems like the buttons end up in the right spot for me, but I haven't done a lot of testing on the iPad. And it could be that there's some issue with Samsung tablets where something's not going right with the way that Meta is getting the screen aspect ratio and adjusting the button layout accordingly. I think you should try to file a bug on that, because I don't know if there's going to be anything you're going to be able to do from your game itself to sort of address that issue. That's going to be something that probably the platform will have to deal with if it's just happening on that particular tablet. So, I'm sorry about that.
Well, thank you for your answer.
Yeah. So anyway, I know that Natasha asked about the camera view and the focus interaction. I have like gone over the laser pen several times, and I have several copies of it here, you see, and I've given out copies of this code to people, and it's actually in. I can give people copies of this laser pen code if you want to look through it, but it definitely shows an example of first-person camera and focus interaction. So I would definitely recommend taking a look at that first. And then if you have questions about how that works, then I can make sure to answer those for you. But I think I've talked about that a bunch, and so I want to make sure I cover other questions first before I go into that. So if there's nobody, if we have time at the end, I can go over like the laser pen again. So let's see. Drew has stacks of questions. David Mills says, how do we send events to spawned items? I'm running into async callbacks. I mean, the really quick answer with the async with spawned items is that I should probably just made a world here for this AMA before I started. For spawned items, you'll get a promise with the spawn, or if you're using the spawn controller, you have the spawn controller that you can wait on a promise for spawning. And you'll get back the items from the promise or when the promise completes for the spawn controller. And then you can just send messages to those items at that point. I'm going to have to launch TypeScript editor. Spawn thing. All right. So, for instance, if you had some asset, and you were doing like a spawn or a spawn asset, this dot props asset on 3, 0, for instance, we'll just say responding at the origin. Then you can, this is we're going to return a promise. And so you can just do like a then on the promise. You get like a bunch of objects back. And then this is an array of objects here, of entities, an array of entities. So, for instance, if you want to send something to the first object, then can this send local event to object, and then assume you have, some event that you want to send to this. Yeah, that would be how you would send. That's something I want to copy. I mean, this would be how you could send. Data is not provided. Oh, got to provide that. I mean, this is an example of how you could send information to something that spawned. So just as an example, just remember that this promise gives you back an array of items, and the first thing that you selected in your asset is going to be the first item in this list of objects you get returned. So usually you should be careful when you're making your assets to pick the first item carefully, know where it is in the list, and that will be the thing that you can communicate with when you spawn your item.
So do you need to send it through a send local event, or can you not use send network event?
Oh yeah, you could use network event or whatever. I mean, when it's first spawned, it will be like you can only do spawning from the server, and everything starts out owned on the server. So it's definitely local to the server. So you can send a local event to it right after it's spawned because it's still going to be owned by the server at that point. So it still will be local to the server. But you could also use a network event here if you wanted to, it's just, a little bit extra overhead, but But if you're going to be
Could
reusing
you
this
make the
event,
screen a little bigger,
Yeah,
please?
hit
Oh,
Control
sorry,
plus
sorry.
a couple times.
Could you make the screen a little bigger?
Yeah, I'm trying to like figure out why it's not responding to the plus key here. Come on.
Control plus.
Yeah, no, it's not zooming for some reason. I don't know why. Hold on just a second. Anyway, so yes, you could send a network event if you wanted to send a network event. For instance, if this was going to be something, this event was something you're going to use in many different places, sometimes you needed to use it across the network because it was going to be this object and be locally owned, then that would definitely make sense to do in that case.
When I was trying to find solutions, chat was making a suggestion that it was supposed to be an async start, and then I was supposed to await it. Why was it suggesting that, and why don't you have to do that?
So the spawn asset here, it returns, as you know, an entity. And so the way you handle promises is you can use .then to like give it a little function to run when the promise is fulfilled. But the async await is a different way of doing this. You can say that this is an async method, and then you could do objects equals await this world spawn. This is going to be equivalent code here. And here, because I said this is an async event, that changes start into something that returns a promise. So anybody else could await on start also if they wanted to. And then the spawn asset, it still returns a promise of an entity, but await here basically says, we're going to immediately return from this function, and we're going to keep sort of remember where we were at, and we're going to wait for this spawn asset to return. And when that promise fulfills, then this code will pick up and continue on. And the value of the promise, which is that entity array, is going to be the resulting value of the await, and will be assigned to this objects variable. So this is equivalent to the then type of syntax, which I had earlier. It's just that this is a little bit easier to use in some cases if you want to write code that doesn't have to think as hard about, awaiting, about the then cases and the catch cases. It looks more like linear code. Just the important thing to remember, though, is the first time you hit an await, this function is going to return. So this rest of the stuff is not going to run right away. So you have to be a little bit careful in your start. Like, you don't want to do some like very important initialization, here, for, this object, because this very important initialization is not going to run until after this await completes. So you want to be thinking about that. You probably want to put the very important initialization before you await anything if you're doing any sort of async start or pre-start stuff, because the order in this function matters, because it's going to execute, and when it gets to the first await, it's going to bail and not execute anything else. So just be aware of that. All right, so we can move on to some other things. Let's see. For CUI of type overlay, if we set the width and height to 100% for mobile and desktop, then the CUI overlay is on top of the default Horizon World UI, as well as the notification should be. So I don't know if you guys, so there are safe zones that you have to be aware of when you're using custom UI. So for instance, if I set this preview device to mobile and I set this UI safe zone, I turn on the UI safe zone and then I jump into the world, it's gonna draw this sort of danger area overlay on the screen for me. And I should just be aware, like, this is where the left locomotion trackpad is, this is where the jump button is, and these are where all of the other buttons are going to be. And it's showing you like the pause and the menu and the reactions and the microphone. They're in these little circles. So this is a notification area up here. You just need to, when you're designing your custom UI, stay clear of those areas and don't put anything there, because there's no way to get rid of these top ones. They're always there. You can use hide system UI to like hide the rest of them if you want. There's a function called hide system UI that you can call. I think it's locally scripted and it's on the player controls object. But you just have to deal with this area up here and make sure you don't try to put anything in your custom UI that's up in that area. So
okay, thank you. I've been looking for this for a while. I didn't realize on the desktop editor it was just a switch, a toggle.
yeah, and I think in desktop it has a different set. Like we don't really care about the desktop editor, but the desktop players or the web players, I mean, they have different safe zone areas you have to be aware of.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Sure. How to set up it together from scratch. So you're talking, Nakasha, I assume you're talking about the laser pen. So I did a whole build with the mentor, which should be recorded. So I can send you a link to that recording, which was like a from scratch building up of the whole laser pen. So I will send that to you in a moment. So Very Nice says, what does Nux test stand for? Nux, I think, is new user experience. There is some recent new things they gave us that had like FTUE and Nux, and like these are all like acronyms that people who do UI design really know about. And like FTUE means first time user experience. Nux, I believe, is new user experience. So that's what those acronyms are for. So moving along, speak up anybody if I'm behind on the chat. So if I'm not getting to something you think is important, let me know. Speaking of iPads, found the same thing, reports itself as mobile, but has a different aspect ratio. Yeah, okay. So location for a lot of these AMA files, reviewing videos and things, I feel like a lot of the info is somewhat difficult to find. I believe that they have improved this is to Drew, I believe that they have improved the surfacing of all of the videos in the forum. I will need to go and check on that exact location, but I can try to send that out to you, Drew, if I can find that information. Drew Anderson.
Yeah, it's like a nightmare of trying to find the information I need. I feel like I just found documentation yesterday. Like they just released like the public documentation from and it was like the first time in a while that I actually felt like I had.
There is a lot of documentation on the Learn site. If you're logged in correctly, I believe you can see it all.
There's a lot of it there, but it's like a bunch of different people wrote it, and then it's just like it's a little confusing to get through and navigate. It's probably the hardest navigation or documentation I've had to learn.
The doc writing has been a very organic experience. There's way more docs than there used to be. Used to be very much a, figure it out on your own experience here back in the early days. But there is, I don't know if you've seen the Horizon Creator Manual, which was done by the community for the community. Wafflecopters kind of led that effort. And there's actually now a GitHub repo for that.
I saw that. It was awesome. That's in the community forums in the,
Yeah, so I think that's in the community forums. That link to that is posted, but that is a public repo. And the idea here is we hoped, so I helped work on that as well as a number of the other mentors and some other contributors. The idea is that hopefully it can be a community-based documentation where you can just fork that repo, edit the stuff, and then make a pull request. And then if it's a high quality change to the doc, we'll merge it in. But we're trying to sort of open source the docs for that because sometimes it just takes a long time for the Horizon devs to like make a good doc for something. And also those docs are all over the place, and the creator manual is trying to be like the one-stop shop for documentation, which does link out to other docs, but it hopefully has a good summary of everything. I mean, we'd really like it to just continue to improve. It's like 200 pages long right now, so you just need to keep growing that. All right, so moving on. Myself and team, this is from Tracy, who are new to building Horizons, but not other platforms with the Polygon limit. Animation can't be imported. Yes, unfortunately, you cannot import animations right now. So hopefully someday that will be coming. The Polygon limit, there is a doc in the Learn site, which definitely has those limits for you. If you go and search for the custom model import section in the doc site, I don't know if anybody has that handy and can drop it in the chat. There is a page there that tells you how many polygons and triangles and how many megabytes of textures you should focus on for your custom models.
Is there a way to fake the animation? Like I know she asked about, or they asked about the animation, the 3D, and I've seen a few worlds where there's I've seen some worlds where it looks like there's animated models.
Meshes. Yeah, so it exists for sure. It's just it doesn't exist for MHCP. So there are 2P and 1P studios, like Oru is basically Meta, who writes Super Rumble. They built Super Rumble, and like the Kaiju world is by whatever their name is, Second Studio or whatever. But that's another 1P world. So they have access to all kinds of stuff we don't have. And then there are 2P creators who build a bunch of other worlds for Meta, and they also have access to a bunch of stuff we don't have. So there is clearly a way to import animated meshes, but they have not made it available to 3P, the third-party creators, which is MHCP yet. For whatever reasons, I'm presuming it's very messy to use, or there's some sort of horrible performance problem that you have to be careful with, or I don't know. But for some reason, it requires a lot of hand-holding, and they're not ready to give it out to us yet.
I mean, in theory, could you turn on and off meshes and just have like very simple animations?
Yeah, I mean, you can do a bunch of things. Like a lot of people have been doing animations for a long time, but it's usually you break your model up into a number of entity parts, and then you are writing scripts to move the different parts relative to each other, or hiding and showing parts of them. I think that there's like somebody did a very, very beautiful world of like a martial arts fight where they basically did a frame by frame animation of all of these different shapes being hidden and shown to actually make the animation. So it was very, very heavy to do, but it did work. Is there a way to implement a flying script that actually works on mobile? There are lots of ways to do flying scripts on mobile. What is your question? This is the Ash immersion. I mean, in a lot of the way the flying scripts worked before was that there were people held something in their hand and then they tilted their hand around. Obviously, you can't do that on mobile because you don't have hands, but you could do something with on-screen controls because you have the player control API. So you could put buttons up on the screen and that you could use them to like steer you and go up and down and move your player around. Or you might want to use focus interaction to like, being able to drag your finger across to show which direction you want to go. And if you drag it this way to the side, you'll start turning more to the right. If you drag it up, you'll start tilting up, and maybe there's like a throttle button or something that makes you go faster or slower. I don't know if you have any more questions about flying, but there's certainly ways to do it. I don't know of anybody who's got one off the top of my head, but I know there are some people. Loire Gonda, Horizon World says local event, local network event, network broadcast event. Local events only sent to the local server world or player. Network is sent to everything. Not sure difference between local event and local broadcast event and network equivalents. Yeah, so I think Brian maybe has answered this already. So like there's three kinds of events. There's local event, there's network event, and then there's the legacy code block event. Pretty much you shouldn't use code block events unless you are talking to other code block scripts that you have, legacy code block scripts, or there are a bunch of built-in events like players entering trigger, player entering world, player collided with obstacle, those are all code block events. So really, for the network events and the local events, those are just two different flavors of events that describe what can be sent to where. And then the broadcast flavors of them are sort of more of the how they're being sent. So the non-broadcast versions of local event and network event are saying, I want to send this event just to that one person over there. And you have a destination in mind, and you know who they are. And so you're going to send it to that entity. Versus the broadcast ones are like, I have no idea who might be listening. I don't even know who cares about this event, but I'm going to just broadcast it to either the whole local runtime if I'm doing a local event, like locally to the server or locally to some client headset, or if it's a network event, I'm broadcasting it to all of the clients and the server all at once. And like hopefully there's someone there who's listening for it. You'll notice that the runtime does give you some interesting errors. If you do send a broadcast event and no one is set up to listen to it, you will get in the console, so-and-so sent, my funny event, broadcast my funny event, and there were no listeners. And that's basically a hint to you that you probably forgot to set up someone to listen to this broadcast event, because it's kind of it has no effect if you broadcast event and no one listens to it. So why are you doing it in the first place? I mean, there might be reasons you would want to do that in certain kinds of cases, but just be on the lookout for that when you're using broadcast events to make sure someone listened to it. Let's see. Tracy O'Neill, Butterly Otter. Yeah, so there's screen setting my zoom level. I think that the zoom level is better now. You show that one more time, how you show the danger zones. Sorry, I don't know if that's been answered by now, but like they're right here in the preview menu. There's this UI safe overlay. You just toggle that on, and then when you play the world, depending on whether you have it on mobile or desktop, you'll get the danger zones will show up, and that's how you know where they are and make sure your UI is not overlapping them. Lots of people sending useful links. Creator manual, favorite documentation yet? Yes, I agree. Someone mentioned using bindings to animate fire. I'm not sure what that question is, Tuna. But if you can elaborate further, that would be great. Console warns when no one received. Is there a way to implement a flying script that actually works on mobile? There's no flying animation. Yeah, there's no good flying animation, no pose for flying that looks good. There is some weird heuristics that they do with the avatar. When your Y velocity is up, going upwards, it kind of does sort of like a little bit of a hero pose as you're flying. And then as your Y velocity goes negative, it starts to do this sort of hand spinning thing. And then like the more crazy your velocity gets, it gets really out of control with its spinning hands. I have no idea how to control that. So let's see. Console log kept firing even after I wasn't running preview. Well, console logs can get backed up if you are logging a lot. This is to Drew. If you are logging a lot, like a lot of stuff every frame, sometimes the console gets behind, and even after you stop, it's still like working through the backlog. So that sometimes happens. Can tilt brush or quill be imported? I don't really, they can, I believe, but I don't really know how. And those would be good questions to ask Jalitza, or Space Glitter Unicorn in like the CMI questions channels in the forum or elsewhere. Like bindings for fire. So I'm not sure. There have been people who have used custom UI and bindings to do flipbooks. So you can have a custom UI with an image, and you can just change the image binding in that custom UI every, 1/10 of a second or something like that, or half a second, and switch to a different image, and you could make a flipbook animation that way. Those sorts of binding updates, like you can't do too many binding updates per second. So this is something that you should be aware of with custom UI, is that there is a limit to the number of binding changes you can make per second before you will overload the custom UI system. And if you do overload it, it will put all of your custom UI on cooldown. And so everything will just stop updating for like a couple of seconds, and then it will start up again. So if you see a case where everything's working, everything's updating, and then everything just kind of freezes and then starts working again, it's probably because you hit the custom UI binding update limit. And so I would recommend using the in-headset performance meters to kind of keep an eye on where you're at with the binding level. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any way to see the performance meters in the desktop editor or on mobile, but you can see them on the web. And you definitely can see them if you use the VR headset. If you go in the VR headset, you go to your settings, all the way on the right, you can enable like the debug settings, and then it shows up on your hand. You'll have an extra little panel, and on there is the real-time performance option, and then that will pop up this sort of HUD that follows you around in VR that shows you a bunch of very interesting performance aspects, and then you can configure that to show you the custom UI binding change level, or the number of bindings you have, or the amount of binding memory you're using, because all those things matter to performance. Yes, there's a number of, I agree, there are a number of things missing on the desktop editor that are problematic. Like, you can't test IWP purchases in the desktop editor. You also can't test IWP purchases on mobile either. You have to test them in VR. That's just where we're at right now. So some things don't work yet in the desktop editor, but hopefully soon. Like, we've made it very clear to them that like these things are important and missing. So I hope that they will add them soon. All right. Anyway, I finally caught up with the chat. If there are other things, anything else that people want to talk about, I could try to take a quick dive into the local camera, first-person camera, and focus interaction stuff, if people want to look at that yet another time, once again, or if people have other things that they would like me to like sort of dive into and show examples of, that would be great too. Sort of hard to build a whole thing in such a short amount of time. The AMAs are not super good for solving complex problems, or for just answering questions and getting people pointed in the right direction.
Charles, I got a quick question. You know how in VR on your wrist you can check your performance, see how your world's running? Can you check that from desktop?
Of this learn URL, I think that people posted that already above, but that's where a lot of the docs are these days that you should be looking at. All right, yes, that's probably why it's Brian Baker. Okay, well, let's see. Do anybody have any other questions?
In VR, you know how you can check to see how your world is running? Is there a way to check on desktop for performance? So you can see your CPU, you can see how many frames per second you're running when you look at your wrist and you see the UI.
Right, yeah, so that is the thing that's not available in, that's the thing that's not available in the desktop editor, but you can do so on the web. So like, I'm just going to jump into this world and then hopefully bring up the web editor, I mean the web preview, and then we'll be able to see it from there. So you can go and you can get a preview, open your preview in your browser. So then I hit the P button, and so it brought up the these stats. I don't know if I can click on them and futz with them to see, like these are the UI binding updates ones. I don't have any UI in this world, but I can, for instance, get draw calls and vertices or something. I guess that's the max metrics I can do. But anyway, this world is not super interesting, but you can see it's got all 28 or 30 draw calls. But this is like the best I know of how to test on the desktop, is to go and launch the web preview on desktop, and then hit the P button, and you'll get something that's kind of like the in headset one. I mean, it's more or less same sort of UI as the in headset one. I mean, this is all the kind of same sort of stuff you get in headset, where you can take samples and slide around and see how things are going. I don't know how to prevent moving my player around when I'm using this thing though. But anyway, hopefully that answers, Dom, what you're asking about. So can someone point me in the direction, build out a decent world currency system? I don't know if there is a template for that. If somebody knows of one, that would be great. I don't actually think I've seen any provided templates that do a world currency, but yeah, I mean, it's basically using PPVs, as RJ is saying, like you just want to use PPVs to keep track of the amount of local currency the person has, and maybe use IWPs to sell them additional currency, but also let them do something to like grind in your world to also earn currency. It is a way to sell things to users that is a little bit easier than having an IWP gizmo to sell things, because it's just sometimes a little bit easier to control the interface to the sale if you're using your own in-world currency. But people should know that it's now possible to use scripts and custom UI to do in-world currency, to do IWP sales now. So like there's a, what's called off the top of my head, but it's thing like launch checkout flow. It's called IW in-world purchase.launch checkout flow. You just give the player and then the SKU of your IWP, and then you can so you could put this call within a custom UI. So you would be able to rather than having to drag out the IWP gizmo and put it somewhere in the world with its funky little yellow box and a little tiny button, you could just write a custom UI that has a pressable, and when they press that pressable, you can just do launch checkout flow and sell the item to them directly that way.
Additionally to that, I know since you're talking about trading and inventory, there is also now the possibility of giving somebody an item without them having to buy it.
Yes, this is also in here somewhere. It's so I believe it's in
on that.
Close to here. It's in, I think it's this world. Remember, get player entitlement, get purchased as grant item to player. So this allows you to just say this player gets this IWP SKU item of this many of it, and there's no need to go through any actual IWP gizmo. You can just, for instance, you can give them an IWP item that's configured as an IWP item that you have for sale as an IWP item, but possibly you've decided that they've done something so great and wonderful in your world that you can just grant it to them without actually making them pay money. So this is a fairly new API. I actually haven't tried using it yet, but I know we've been asking for it for a long time. So it's great. I mean, I don't know how many people use the inventory, which is that backpack. You can put durable items in people's backpack, and then they can pull them out of their backpack and spawn them on their own. And that could be great for, different kinds of adventure games or something like that. And so, being able to grant items to players a way to sort of pre-provision up their backpack at the start of the game without them requiring them to buy everything. So you could give them 5 free food or, something like that, or 3 free potions, and then the rest of them they have to buy. But they're all, those 5 free things and 3 free potions are in their backpack, in their inventory, and they can use them just like their IWP items that they got later. So that is
I'm curious about, I'm pretty new to the ecosystem here. I'm curious about what is a for the hackathon. I'm trying to build a world that doesn't push the limits of gambling, I guess. It's not really gambling, but anytime there's currency and buying and selling of things or buying items in the thing, it feels a little slimy, and I'm kind of wondering to what level
I mean, it's a, you know, a line you have to be sort of have to walk. I mean, you definitely don't want to do anything that is going to give people real world money for something that they're gambling with real world money in your game.
Yeah, definitely not. That's obvious, but I'm just wondering
Even a
at what
sweepstake,
point.
not good. Don't like sell sweepstakes tickets and then some people win a headset, you know, or something like that. That's
Yeah,
very
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know to be really careful about gambling stuff, but I want to, like, what's the general vibe? Like, should my world be 18 if you can purchase
I mean, if you're doing something that's promoting a gambling-like activity, you probably are going to want to be thinking about an 18 plus world. There are definitely people who have gambling worlds like poker worlds and, you know, stuff like that, you know, where people, you know, do, you know, use they're buying in-world currency and then, you know, they're gambling with it, but there's no way for them to cash out. So
what about like what about on some of these worlds they just have like a reward system if you go through and complete the task or whatever? Like is that
as long as you're giving things out that are not real world tangible things, I think you're probably a much safer.
okay.
But if you're like, I mean, there's plenty of games out there that are like pay to win kind of things, and you know, it's a little bit of a, not a great feel, you know, if like people realize that you're just farming them, making them, you know, pay you in order to like get satisfaction to win the game. But you know, that's the thing. I don't think there's anything particularly that I know of that Meta says about that, but you should definitely check the IWP terms and conditions that they're in the documentation in the Learn site, which in the monetization section.
I might just not mess with it and just stick with the data and just keep it all fake.
Yeah, just like, I don't know, don't be too skeezy.
Okay. Easy skeezy.
I don't know if, and I'm not, I mean, this is really something you may want to ask the next time they have like a subject matter expert talking about the contests. What if there's any like red lines that you need to be aware of? I would ask them for more guidance on that. They're probably not going to give you any legal guidance though, because they don't want to be responsible either, like much as I am not giving you any legal guidance. But they certainly want people to use IWPs. So that probably means it's okay to have like your game gets better if you spend IWP money in it. So, all right, so let me go on. How about a quick demonstration overview on where and how to save persistent data like game state? I can do that really, really quickly. So if, for instance, we can pretend like, fix this. We can pretend like we have some save data function that gets called by some event that gives us a player. And, you know, we can either do something really simple like, so the first thing you need to do, of course, with IWP, with a persistent state is you need to like set up persistent state. So you need to set up a variable group, you know, not having variable groups in the world. We need to add one. That's variable, called AMA variable. You can have variable groups that you share between your worlds, which is very cool. So you can have somebody do something in one world and then go to another world. And if you've shared the variable group across those worlds, then they can get access to that information in the other world. So this will be called some number. So we'll make a number persistent variable. But the nice thing that you can also do now is you can make object variables too. Some object So we have a some number and object, it's called AMA variable group. So usually I make a little got already object variable and some number. So if we wanted to save some number for some variable, some player, it's super easy. You just this persistent storage, set player variable, the player. Then you have to sort of compose together the variable group name and colon, and then the PPV name, and then the score. You know, for instance, and this will just store the score number into this player variable. You could also have an object, which usually, you know, you might want to create a type for this. You know, that has a score and their items found or whatever, you don't know. So you have some number of stats you're keeping track of for the player. So maybe instead of just storing a number in a variable, you might instead might want to get the persistent storage, get player variable, player stats, player colon. So you could get their player stats. Make this a let actually. And you know, if they don't have anything, like if you've never stored player stats for them, then you'd make up some brand new player stats thing, which has 0 score and 0 items found, and then like player stats score, and then you could just store this value back into the player variable. I said store this object, this player stats object, back into the player variable for the object PPV. So anyway, that's just sort of a really quick look at how you get and set player variables, both from numbers and for objects. Why are my comments in cursive? Because I installed a font that makes them look pretty. My issue with IWP is that the reference materials are not unified. Some sort of reference Oculus relevant material. Don't know what to say. There is a lot of documentation about IWP in the Learn site. Some of it is about code blocks, and some of it's with TypeScript. The TypeScript API has gotten a bit better lately, better than the code block one. So I would definitely use the TypeScript APIs for IWP. Then a few casinos. There's no race games. Where do you pick a winner? You pick a winner. Card saves with betting points. Will those be dinged on the half gone there? Again, I don't know what if they're going to ding anything on the hackathon. If there's anything in the rules about the contest that say to stay away from gambling like things or not. Just know that if you have something that promotes gambling, it's probably going to end up 18 plus, and that really restricts the reach of your world, because there, you know, are a lot of kids on the platform. So the 10 plus and 13 plus, you know, market is pretty large, and if you want to reach a bunch of people, you'll probably want to avoid those things. Some that may be interested to talk on mobile or different camera modes. I use in a lot of game. I have a lot of stuff with forced look at, which I use for my flight system. I have not used forced look at. That's a brand new API that came out, I think, this week. I think my understanding is it's just a way to overload only 3 of the cameras support forced look at. But it is
orbit, follow, and attach, I believe, are the 3. And I tried, but like when I switched camera modes, like first person, third person, they were great, no problem. Orbit, follow, like they seem to behave a lot like third person, and the forced look at an entity doesn't seem to override the camera behavior in any way. And so I'm wondering if they're functional.
I haven't tried them. They just came out. I have to give them a try. All of those different camera modes are kind of like there's only, the cameras are all sort of the same. All of the different cameras are sort of the same. They're all like some distance away from some target and they follow it in some kind of way. And a lot of them sort of have degenerate behaviors where they all kind of behave the same as one another. Like if you have instant motion and instant rotation and all that, then they start looking a lot like the first person camera or the third person camera. They all have just very subtle differences about how you can fiddle with the speed at which they track to new positions and such like that. The fixed camera, is actually a pretty powerful one because you can put the camera anywhere and you can do an on update loop that where you decide every frame where the camera is, how it's rotated, everything. So if you want to get really fancy with the cameras, the fixed camera is a way to do.
Yeah, that's a good call because I do use a fixed camera for cutscenes. So I want to force the player to look at something because, oh, look, a monster just appeared. But yeah, you're right. Might be able to just like force it behind the player, looking at my monster and track essentially a forced look at manually by using an update loop, right?
Yeah, I mean, a long time ago, I wrote an orbit camera before the orbit camera came out using the fixed camera and like a bunch of on update code to like make it orbit around the player in some way. But then the orbit camera came out. I'm like, oh, we don't really need this anymore.